All right, let's dive into one of the most dramatic, down-to-the-wire moments in American history. We're talking about the final chapter of the Revolution, the peace treaty that officially put the United States of America on the map. And believe me, it almost didn't happen.
And I'm not exaggerating. The formal independence of the United States, the very thing they'd fought a brutal war for, was hanging by the thinnest of threads. And the biggest threat wasn't a foreign army, it was the new nation itself.
So how does that even happen? How do you almost fail to sign off on your own freedom? Well, to answer that, we have to go back in time to a freezing cold statehouse in the dead of winter, where a non-negotiable deadline was just about to expire.
Okay, let's set the scene here. The war is over, but the fight has moved from the battlefield to the calendar. Now, it's a desperate race against time.
So here's the deal. The treaty itself, signed way back on September 3rd, had a strict 6-month deadline baked right into it. Both sides had to approve it and get the signed copies back across the Atlantic Ocean by March 3rd. Now remember, a one-way trip across the ocean could take 2 months. That leaves a razor-thin margin for the American Congress to get its act together. There was literally no time to waste.
But before we even get to that deadline drama, you have to ask, how did the Americans get such a good treaty in the first place? I mean, they were a brand new, tiny nation. They were basically a minor piece in a giant game of global chess being played by empires.
So, when peace talks started in Paris in 1782, you have to remember that America's supposed allies, France and Spain, had their own fish to fry. France was tired of the expense of war, and Spain was obsessed with getting Gibraltar back from the British. The interests of the new United States, that wasn't exactly their top priority.
In fact, it gets even worse. The French foreign minister, seeing the war's mounting costs, secretly drafted a plan that would have been a disaster for America. Sure, the U.S. would get independence, but it would be boxed in along the Atlantic coast. All that vast western territory would be handed over to Britain and Spain. It would have totally crippled America's future before it even started.
John Jay, one of the American negotiators, got wind of this. Realizing their so-called allies were about to sell them out, he made an incredibly bold, super risky move. He broke all the rules and started talking directly to the enemy, Great Britain, in secret. He was gambling that the British would rather have a strong, independent U.S. to trade with than a weak one being manipulated by France.
So, did this high-stakes backdoor diplomacy actually work? What did this crazy maneuver get for the brand new United States? Well, the result was nothing short of an impossible bargain.
The outcome was just stunning. The American team, we're talking John Adams, Benjamin Franklin, John Jay, they secured terms nobody thought possible. Full independence, check. A western border all the way out to the Mississippi River, you got it. Crucial fishing rights off Canada, yep. And maybe best of all, the U.S. didn't have to pay any war reparations. It was a total diplomatic home run. And just listen to the language in the treaty itself. It talks about forgetting past misunderstandings and restoring friendship. I mean, think about that. After a long and bitter war, this wasn't the sound of a victor crushing an enemy. It was a forward-looking document aimed at reconciliation. Pretty remarkable stuff.
So, the diplomatic war? Won. The treaty? A masterpiece. But now it faced its biggest and honestly most ridiculous obstacle. The very American government it was supposed to legitimize.
See, back then, the U.S. wasn't run by the Constitution we know. It was governed by something called the Articles of Confederation. And to put it bluntly, this system created an incredibly weak national government. It was more of a firm league of friendship, as they called it, where the individual states had all the real power.
And here was the kicker. Under the Articles, to make any major decision, like, ratifying the treaty that ends the war and secures your existence, you needed a quorum. 9 of the 13 states had to have delegates present to even hold a vote.
But as the clock was ticking down to that March deadline, guess what? Delegates just weren't showing up. Thanks to a brutal winter and maybe just a general lack of urgency, on January 12th, the treaty is just sitting there, and only 7 states are represented. They were 2 states short of being able to do a single thing. You can just imagine the panic. Urgent letters are flying out. Finally, a delegate from Connecticut shows up. Okay, that's 8. There's still 1 short. Then, on January 13th, a delegate from South Carolina named Richard Beresford, who was sick, literally dragged himself out of his sickbed and made the difficult journey from Philadelphia. With his arrival, they finally, barely, had their 9 states.
At the absolute last second, they made it. The very next day, January 14th, the Congress voted unanimously to approve the treaty. They had secured American independence on paper, just in the nick of time.
So, the crisis was averted. The treaty was ratified. Congress immediately sent out a proclamation telling everyone the news. The United States was officially a sovereign nation on the world stage. And in their announcement, they used this interesting phrase, a federal bond, that bound them all together. They knew that this treaty, this piece of paper, was now the legal glue holding their fragile new country together.
And yet, that whole chaotic mess to get the treaty signed showed just how weak that federal bond really was. The fact that the entire foundation of the country almost fell apart because of some bad weather and a few delegates not feeling like traveling, that was a terrifying wake-up call. They had independence, sure, but real unity, that was still a long way off.
So the war for independence was won, no doubt about it. But that last-minute scramble to ratify their own victory proved a much bigger point. The long, difficult journey of actually becoming the United States of America, well, that had only just begun.